My name is Rick Firestone.
My name is Ben Bugale, and you're listening to pixelprojectradio, a video game and video game club style podcast where we talk about the games that we play, we love, hopefully you play and love as well. And today we're gonna shoot the breeze a little bit, and we're also gonna talk a little bit about puzzles and video games. So let me just first start by saying, Rick, how you doing, baby boy?
I'm doing pretty good. I was talking with you before we actually started. There was a new channel in our work Slack created called Unpopular Opinions. So it's been a pretty big time sink for a lot of the day today.
I would imagine that everybody had a lot to say, because unpopular opinions can actually be rather popular whenever people actually talk about them.
Yeah, I said that I didn't care for the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and that a lot of people were not happy about that.
But, then there shouldn't be an unpopular opinions. It's supposed to be a safe space, is it not?
That's what I said. I said I understood the assignment.
You probably got 120% on that assignment, but did pineapple on pizza come up at all?
Yeah, of course pineapple on pizza came up.
See, now I enjoy that. I don't know about you.
I'll never choose it over another style of pizza generally, but I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's fine. I think it's good. It's just I'm probably never going to order it for myself.
See, and I always do, but that's just me. But what was the most popular unpopular opinion?
Oh geez, I don't remember. I don't want to go back and check. There were a couple. I think White Claws being gross was one of them. That was pretty popular. I'm not a White Claw person. I know you like your seltzers.
I like non-alcoholic seltzers, but I am not in the camp of drinking an alcoholic seltzer.
Really? I could have swore I saw you with Trulies a couple of times when we've recorded.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, for those listening, Ben is generally sauced when we're recording.
Yes.
You should hear the outtakes. You think our episodes are long? It's a regular work day.
Yeah, there usually comes a point around the 2 hour and 15-minute mark where I start doing Dean Martin impressions with the alcohol, and I then start crying to Rick. It's healthy.
Yeah, you always know the Dean Martin impressions are coming because Ben usually says, "What's a fella got to do to get a drink around here?" And then it just starts.
That's I don't know what I was expecting, but that's pretty good. Yeah. That sounds like me.
Speaking of expectations, we're talking about a video game topic today instead of an actual game. And what is that topic, Ben?
Today we're talking about puzzles in video games, which is extremely broad and extremely vague, but it's something that I would say anybody who's listening to this that likes video games enjoys puzzles as well. I think that I think that's a synonymous of group. I think there's nothing but overlap there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And they're everywhere. Like we talked about in the horror episode, or not the horror episode, but in, I think, what was it, at Dead of Night?
Mm-hmm. How
there's DNA of horror in a multitude of genres. I think we could say the same about puzzles, could we not?
100%. I mean, At Dead of Night was full of them. The Cat Lady was full of them. And Amnesia they were all three full of basic puzzles when you think about it.
Yeah, and I think we could talk more about what a good puzzle game is, or even what a puzzle is, as we go forward. But why don't we start? What is or what are some of your favorite puzzle games?
Well, Rick, if I may, I'd like to begin with the definition of what a puzzle is.
Webster's Dictionary defines puzzle as...
Webster's Dictionary, I don't actually know if this is Webster, but it was on Google.
Oh, you're being for real?
Oh, it's right here.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was making fun of you.
Well, now I'm leaving.
That's like
I'm gonna go get sauce.
There it is. What's a fellow got to do to get a drink around here?
What does a fellow got to do to drink around?
It's like the beginning of every college freshman's essay on anything is Webster's Dictionary defines gentrification.
Satire. Yes.
I'm sorry, Ben. I'm being rude. Please continue.
No. That's not rude at all. I mean, because it is funny, but like honestly, a puzzle at the heart of the definition, so that we can establish that, is a game, toy, or problem designed to test ingenuity or knowledge. So by that measure, video games are, in many cases, in and of themselves, puzzles. Some of my favorite games that involve puzzles, because I don't know if I would say puzzle games directly. I know that there's a game that you want to talk about, I think, at length, because we've talked about this as a potential in the episode, and that's a game that starts with a T, but we'll get to that. But for me, I love the Legend of Zelda series, as probably most everybody knows, because it's chock full of puzzles in their dungeons. And I love the Professor Layton series. Those are two of my favorite games that are heavily reliant on puzzles. That and a lot of horror games and mystery games. But what about you?
Yeah, so I think when I'm thinking of puzzle games, some that stick out to me, I do like the classics. I think Tetris is probably the best example of a video game puzzle game. I think in many ways Pac-Man can be considered puzzle or strategy.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of bleed over between those two that we could talk about here. Obviously, Portal 2 is a standard. And another one that I played recently is a game called Catherine, which is by the developer Atlas, the same folks that did Persona. It would be an interesting one to do on the show. Weird story, real weird, but very interesting puzzle gameplay. And I think, what listeners might notice here is that each of these games have a very unique approach to how they decide to implement puzzles.
Absolutely. I mean, some of them the games are literally just puzzles. Some of them are games where you have to interact with your environment and work the puzzle. Some of them are, they're literal puzzles within the game, and it's kind of Inception-ish, because the game itself is the puzzle, and then what you're doing is solving a puzzle within the game, and it gets kind of thick with about 4 C's, I would say, depending on what game you're playing. Not as thick as one of them country bears, but I digress. I see you.
Yeah, those country bears really are something.
Oh my God, and the bear on Splash Mountain. If you're a fan of the bear on Splash Mountain in Disney World and how unfortunately thick they made him, shoot us a DM on Instagram. Let us know.
So I was actually watching a YouTube video earlier today, and the gentleman in question, the channel's name is The Game Over Analyzer. They laid out a series of checkpoints. They laid out a checklist that most puzzles, or at least most successful ones, have. If I may, I was going to read through some of them.
Please, yes. That's what I'm here for. That's just what I signed up for. God darn it.
So again, the channel's name is The Game Over Analyzer. So they state it needs a core mechanic. There needs to be implicit learning, complexity escalation, reprisals, and subversions. And the one thing that I add to that would be having a clear goal.
Yeah, that's fair.
So do you want to... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say which can be twisted depending on the game, because Professor Layton will do that subverting of what you think the goal is. And then you go, oh, I see. But definitely that there is a clear goal has to be part of it.
Yeah, so let's take one that everybody knows, like Tetris. I think most everybody, even if you're just a casual gamer, will know what Tetris is. So there's a core mechanic that is rotating the blocks or gravity, making the blocks fall. There's implicit learning. You have to learn where blocks fit, as well as the core mechanic of the rows clearing. Complexity escalation comes with speed. Reprisals, that comes with the cycling of the blocks. And subversions, I guess you could argue that it comes with the randomization, but perhaps Tetris doesn't have subversions. And then obviously the clear goal is to get Tetris, right? You have to clear the whole screen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Tetris, which I believe came out in 1984, by Russian-American Alexei Pachitnov.
By Russian-American Alexander Tetris.
Yeah, that's his name. That's his name. My mom would say, you know who invented Tetris? And I'd say, who, Mom? And she'd say, Joe Tetris. And I was like, oh, you got me again, Mom.
It's my favorite joke, one of my favorite jokes of all time. And, it's actually kind of prescient for this episode because we'll talk about non-video game puzzles later, but who invented the Rubik's Cube? Erno Rubik. Mm-hmm. It's named after him.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where the joke comes from.
I don't know. I don't know if I ever will.
Or maybe it comes after the guy that invented Mickey Mouse, Walt Mouse.
Yes, Walter Elias Mouse, who wasn't really known for drawing the mouse that well. I digress. God rest him. So Tetris really... So, Rick, you described how Tetris works to the T, but it really is a pillar in the world of video games in general, but not to mention the number of video games that follow this formula of falling blocks, which that is its own category of puzzle games, the falling block puzzles. And there is a slew of them that Puyo Puyo, Tactics, Super Swap, Dr. Mario, all of these are, these falling block puzzle games. And then there's advancing block puzzles where it rises from below instead of, dropping from above. And those are things like the Collapse series, I would say, is one of the most popular to come out of that genre. But Tetris, think about the impact it made on gaming in general. I don't want to say it was the first puzzle game because that wouldn't be fair exactly, but it's sort of like César Franck in the music world, right? He was... a monolith of sorts that inspired so many others, though there were other composers at the time. He still was inspired a whole generation.
Yeah, particular with his chamber music. And it would be disingenuous to call Tetris the first puzzle game because then that gets into the territory, well, what is a game? And is a jigsaw puzzle not a game? And you could split hairs and say, okay, it was maybe the first puzzle video game. I don't know if that's accurate or not. And I guess that also depends on whether or not you consider Pac-Man a puzzle game. Which I kind of do, and that gets into this territory of strategy bleeding into puzzles.
Mm-hmm. And that's something to be mindful of in all of this. A lot of the earliest video games, if I'm not mistaken, what we could call a video game are actually like mathematical strategy games, and even games like Hangman, whenever they started to experiment with those in early concepts of computers. You know what I mean? Those are, you're still trying to solve, which actually I have a list of light definitions that kind of go under the puzzle game category that kind of parallel what you were sharing, if I might share those.
Let me think about it.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Papa. So puzzle games can include matching objects based on categories like patterns, colors, shapes, symbols, etc. Visualizing and manipulating objects in time and space, memorizing complex patterns, tackling increasing complexities of puzzles that build upon previous puzzles, solving puzzles under a time constraint or limited life constraint, which is, my favorite, cough, cough, not always, applying previous known knowledge about the world and thinking outside of the box, which, again, a lot of those just parallel what you read earlier, but this is another list of a definition of what puzzle games are. And I don't know if it's worth it for us to sit here and try to define are all puzzles games and are all games puzzles, because I think that there is at least a very thin amount on either side of that Venn diagram. Because I don't think that every game is a puzzle, and I don't think every puzzle is a game. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, strategy games that are tactile in nature, like thinking of, Fire Emblem Three Houses, or I guess Fire Emblem in general. I just happen to be playing Three Houses. It wouldn't be entirely accurate to call it a puzzle game. It would be sort of the same thing if I invited you over for sandwiches, Ben, and when you got here, I served you a hot dog. Mm-hmm. It's like some might argue that that's technically correct, although it isn't because the hot dog is not a sandwich. But it's it's one of those technically correct, which is the worst kind of correct deals. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So what makes a good puzzle game to you? Like when you were looking for a puzzle game specifically, or even when you encounter a puzzle in a video game, like what are some criteria for you specifically that makes it a good experience?
Speaking candidly, and I appreciate the question, and I want to hear you answer it as well. A lack of pretentiousness is a big deal, and I know that might sound like, it shouldn't be a point number one, but it is for me. In a lot of puzzle games, something that can drive me nuts is, or in video games that feature puzzles, are, how do I put this? There are some puzzle games that are difficult for the sake of being difficult, or are kind of like smart-ass games where like, haha, we're just here to fool you. And like, that's fine. I like being fooled every once in a while, and I like things to be difficult. I don't want bones thrown too terribly much, which I think is why I like a lot of games made by Rare, such as Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, because they have puzzles that are challenging but not pretentious. So that matters to me, is whether it's presentation, I guess. Other things that matter to me in puzzle games are the satisfaction factor, which sounds silly, but like there's a threshold, right, of complexity to, I'm not sure what I'd call those ratios, but there's a certain threshold of complexity that I'm looking for in my puzzle games that I want to bend my brain just enough that like I'm about to look up how to do it online, but I don't have to do it for literally everything. You know what I mean? Like when we did Cat Lady, there were a lot of things where I did look up. I was like, I have literally no idea what you're expecting me to do here. And it wasn't that it was pretentious. It was just like, this is a stretch,
I'd like to sit on the pretentious idea for a moment if you want, but the reason that I consider Cat Lady to kind of maybe fail at puzzles is a strong word, but I'm going to say it, fail at puzzles, is because it doesn't stick to a premise, and it doesn't, or a core mechanic, you could say, and it doesn't escalate the complexity. And there's no reprisals, right? Like if we're just going to rattle off what I mentioned earlier from the Game Over Analyzer's list, it just seems to sort of haphazardly throw stuff in and say, figure it out. Versus, something, to go back, Ben, you mentioned you'd like to hear some of mine, to go back to something like Portal 2, for example. It is the same mechanic throughout the entire game, right? Not including the gels. It is the same mechanic. You shoot portals, you move through portals. You're always going to move through portals the same way. It's just they increase the complexity as it goes on those base mechanics. And that, I think, ultimately to me is what I appreciate in a puzzle game, is a simple mechanic that forces you to think creatively and problem solve. Ben, what did you mean exactly by pretentiousness? I'm not sure I follow.
Like, I don't, and this could be a little bit of a stretch, but there are some games that, like, I don't think Professor Layton does this necessarily, but there are some games that, I would say at Dead of Night gets a little bit dangerously close to it. With like some of the presentation of things is almost a little bit high and mighty, and I know it's a stretch here, but like there are some that just make puzzles difficult for the sake of difficulty, whereas I think in a game like Portal 2, which I love Portal 2, it makes you use your portal gun in original and creative and cool ways, but you're still it's the same core mechanic, like you said, but there's a great amount of creativity that goes into it, and it's never, everything you need is always right there. Everything you need is within reach. You know what I mean?
And I think that's an aspect of puzzles that is good. Having everything available to you, not throwing in surprise mechanics. I can't agree with you that at Dead of Night has any puzzle elements at all, really. I think the closest thing that would come to that would be the question mechanic, right? But
that's what I meant, yeah.
There's really no ingenuity to it. You could just randomly piece stuff together and go down a list until you figure it out. I mean, there's nothing preventing you from solving that blockade in a completely uncreative way. So that's to me why, like, I wouldn't consider that a puzzle game. And to be perfectly honest, that's also part of why I don't really like Zelda puzzles, is because they don't really like they're puzzles technically, but it's really just if A, then B, and then repeat, right? There's never any increase in complexity to it, and they're rarely difficult. They're just sort of tedious. Like, you just follow this chain of operations. Does that make sense?
It does and it doesn't to me. So whenever I talk about it, Dead of Night, I'm not calling it a puzzle game. I'm talking about the idea of bringing those items together. Like, for example, the game was pretty bad at guiding me to hints at certain points, and that drove me nuts. So, like, sometimes I couldn't put things together because I just didn't have something. And I had no idea I didn't have it, which to me can be a little bit shitty, for lack of a better word. When it comes to the Legend of Zelda games, what I like is, I wouldn't say that it's just an if not A, then B, because there are a lot of moments in the game, like, for example, and I'm not trying to ruin anything for anybody, but like in Woodfall Temple in Majora's Mask, for example, we get the bow. And something that I found satisfying, especially in the year 2000, whenever I was 8 years old, and I'm not saying that every puzzle in that game is easy or just for 8-year-olds, but in Woodfall Temple, there's a torch, and I didn't really pay attention to this torch because there are torches all over the dungeons. You know what I mean? It's just like something that's there, and they don't matter. But there came a point where there was a dead torch in the middle of this room, and I was like, how do I light this thing on fire? Because no Deku stick can help me make this happen, nothing. And then I realized, wait a second, I just got the bow. What if I stand next to the torch, shoot it down? That stuff is very pleasurable to me. And especially the final puzzle of Skyward Sword, as much of a pain in the rear as it was, I love it desperately because that is actually a puzzle. It's not just a dungeon, and I think that's cool. Creativity is everything.
And I think your verbiage there is important because that's the classic Legend of Zelda thing, right? Is it gives you an item, and then you immediately use that item to solve a puzzle. And then, like, 75% of the time, you just don't really need to use that item anymore for puzzles, right? Like, the bow and arrow is a good one. The, what is that? The truth magnifying glass, or the eye of truth?
The lens of truth, yeah.
The lens of truth, that's it. That's one that has uses outside of where you first get it. But largely, anytime I remember, whether it's Ocarina or Majora, the Oracle series, Link's Awakening, anytime I remember getting the bow and arrow or the slingshot, it's like, okay, you have to use it right now, and then the rest of the game, maybe.
See, and for me in Majora's Mask, you get the bow, Woodfall. You have to use the fire arrows, and I think that's where I like the core mechanic. So we have the core mechanic of the bow, and then we have appendages off of that, like fire arrows, ice arrows, which we use in the water temple, and then light arrows, which we use later on. So, I mean, you're still using it constantly and have to use it to solve puzzles. It's just, I don't want to say limited, but you know what I'm saying. Like, now there are some masks that drive me nuts in Majora's Mask because I wish I could use it more, but no. There are 24, though, so I'll give them a little bit of a pass there.
Yeah, and for many of those masks, to find out how to use them properly, you have to talk to townsfolk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Generally,
they're optional, right? You could go through the whole game and not talk to anybody that you don't have to complete the story, right? And you would miss a lot of the optional content, which, I'm generally all for talking to as many NPCs as you can because world building. But, that brings up the question, is that a puzzle? Having to talk to a random person or read a random inscription somewhere in the world, and then it tells you to use this item to activate this quest. Is that a puzzle? I don't know.
I don't think necessarily. I think it is a game that contains puzzles through its dungeons especially. I guess that's what I think of with Legend of Zelda.
Yeah, and even beyond Legend of Zelda for things like that. Skyrim is another good example, or the Elder Scrolls in general, having to talk to a random NPC to figure out then what to do with this seemingly innocuous item. Right? Is that a puzzle? Not really. Does it have puzzle elements? Kind of. You're you were learning new information. That's sort of implicit learning. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. What are your favorite puzzle games, Rick, or games that feature puzzles? Because, you know, I don't just sit around playing puzzle games all day, although I do enjoy Two Dots. What about you?
Is Two Dots a game?
Yes, and it's very good.
Okay. I didn't know that was a game. I was like, I'm picturing you staring at two dots on a page and just being like, this is great. It's like, I don't get this.
I've done that too.
I think we all have. I mean, Portal 2 is definitely my favorite, along with Tetris. I don't often seek out puzzle games, not because I don't like them. It's just not really a genre that I am an expert in. But other games that I really like that include elements of puzzles are, Disco Elysium, BioShock, and the Mario games.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I consider Mario very much in a similar. I mean, a lot of those Nintendo games and their puzzles are very, world based, and I love them too.
Yeah, and BioShock, it's got the hacking mechanic. That's a puzzle. That's just straight up a puzzle.
100%.
Yeah, at least in BioShock 1. I haven't played the hacking in BioShock 2. I know it's different. Disco Elysium has dialogue trees, and you can solve a lot of them uncreatively just by checking off the list, and the game makes a point to comment on that down the line too, which is an interesting choice. But there are some that you have to answer certain dialogue trees in a certain way to unlock the path, and some of them are nonsensical and sort of poking fun at the idea in and of themselves, like the one with Egghead. I know you haven't played the game yet, Ben, but you'll love Egghead when you meet him. And others that require you to answer a certain way and sort of either learn about this individual or group or just listen to what they're saying and proceed appropriately. The Mario games are interesting to me, and this is part of why they've always intimidated me a little bit, is because there's a clear goal, right? There's always a clear goal, whether it's get to the end, and I'm talking about 3D Mario specifically, sorry.
Sure. No, yeah.
Whether it's get to the end, or collect 100 coins, or collect 6 stars. Or I guess it would be collect 1 star, or collect 6 red coins.
I get you.
There's always that clear goal, but you have an arsenal of mechanics, and you can really solve those sort of fetch quests, for lack of a better word, as creatively as you want. Even getting from point A to point B, beginning to the end of the level, you can do in just a myriad of ways, right? And we see speedrunners do this all the time and exploit that like crazy. And that's one of the reasons that I like the Mario games, but they've always intimidated me a little bit just because of, the sheer amount of ways you can go about solving anything. I mean, that's got puzzle elements to it,
It does. And I think that's what attracts me to that generation of Nintendo 64 games, such as Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, Banjo-Kazooie, Banjo-Tooie, Super Mario 64, and even, into GameCube with Sunshine and Twilight Princess and all these games, because that's just it. There are some puzzles that are, bumpers on, straight down. You have to figure it out and get it just right. But there's a lot of them where you have to get creative, or you can do it multiple ways. And I love it. How do you feel about WarioWare? That's technically a multiple puzzle game. Have you ever played the WarioWare Inc. games?
No, actually, I haven't.
Rick, you would have a bloody field day with WarioWare.
How is it? I just assumed that it was like Mario Party, but a little rude. Like, what is it?
No, I think I don't want to say that you figured it out, but that's basically it. No, it's single player, and you have like a certain number of lives. And when you get one of the random pop-up puzzles wrong, you lose a life, and you're basically trying to go for as long as you possibly can, and the games get faster and more complicated as they go. So it's sort of like the chaotic evil to Mario Party, being lawful good. Well, I don't know about lawful. A game that we are going to play that I'm excited for is Superliminal, and that has puzzle all over it.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that one. I haven't started it just yet. I'm planning on starting that here in a couple of days, but yeah, very excited for that too. And other games that we've talked about too, such as Obra Dinn, Return of the Obra Dinn, I should say.
Yes.
Feature puzzle elements where you have to sort of put together a series of clues to advance the story. And I think all of these are combining, these same core mechanics, well, I mean, not to be redundant, but the same core mechanics of having a core mechanic and then progressing the complexity escalation up, as well as, giving you patterns and or subversions to create a successful experience. I think that's what makes a good puzzle game, right?
I would agree with you. I would agree entirely. This whole conversation about puzzles in video games, and I know there are other games that we can mention and talk about, like even Minesweeper on your computer, right? That's technically a puzzle game. But the thing that bothers me is that there's, a very, I'd say as the generations kind of change a little bit, I'd say that this opinion is changing. But a lot of people who think that video games, are just kind of like mind-rotting devices. I don't, in most cases, they're testing knowledge and application and use of context clues. Puzzles are at the core of gaming, and we like those brain teasers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that comes down to a belief that I hold firmly that, video games are a culmination of various art forms, right? I mean, music, visual animation, storytelling, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
and then adding in the interactive element, it takes it to a new level that many other mediums don't reach. And that's not to say that other mediums are invalidated. That's not the argument at all. It's just that video games are such a unique thing that, they deserve their place. But shit, I lost track of your question. What track did you put me on?
Oh, no, I was just saying, like, video games are legitimate forms of, using these, this gray matter between our ears. That they are a legitimate source of testing our knowledge and our comprehension skills and using context clues. I mean, it's everything we're learning throughout the course of our lives, through our own experience, through burning our hands on the stovetop, but also from what we learn in school. I mean, I don't think that video games should just be put down as something for, the dull-minded or the mind-rotting kind of varietals of, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think the public discourse is changing about that. I don't think anymore you have a lot of boomers that are talking about video games rotting your mind or shit like that. At least I don't run into those in my daily life. I mean, even at work, I have 40, 50-year-old coworkers that play games. There really is, to quote IGN, there's a little something for everybody.
Right. And that's exactly why I said, it's becoming less popular of an opinion now, as the generations kind of change and opinions change. But that's just it. Yeah. I mean, Victoria's parents, for example, when they were, I forget if it was I think it was when they were getting ready for their wedding, they actually stopped going to the arcade, put their money together, and bought a Nintendo and said, we'll save money by not going to the arcade. And, they're in their 50s now. And Victoria would go to her mom whenever she was little and be like, I can't beat this level on Banjo-Kazooie. And her mom would bloody do it.
Yeah, I don't want kids, but it would be a really special feeling to help my theoretical child with a video game, or demolish them in Smash, in Mario Kart.
Oh, yeah.
In Mario Party. Just all of the ones that ruin friendships. They're going to ruin my relationship with my kid, too.
Which, by the way, Rick, have you ever played Super Smash Brothers with Johnny Key?
No, I haven't.
I have a story I want to tell you, and then I have a little bit of a question on puzzles that I'd like to ask you. But let me just say this about Smash Brothers and Jonathan Key. I was once playing Smash Brothers with him, Dalton, and Brian years ago, and we were all picking our characters. And I don't know if I picked Toon Link or if I picked Ness or someone, and I forget. I think Dalton or Brian yelled, "Johnny, play as Rob." And he went, "No, Johnny, you should totally play as Rob." And I said, "What happens when Johnny plays as Rob?" And Johnny said, "Please don't make me do this." "No, Johnny, play as Rob." Literally, he kept all of his stocks, and no one else took any stocks. He literally killed everyone. And I was like, "Good God, Johnny." Goes, "Yeah, he was my main once, and they like to watch me do this." Like he like, it was like he had awoken like a beast within him, and just Johnny Key as Rob. And this was like 5 or 6 years ago, but good God, it was impressive.
It's all fun and games until the mains come out.
And it was poetry in motion watching him play as Rob. Like it was rehearsed. It was beautiful. I'm still kind of shell-shocked and traumatized. Digressing, I have to ask you, and I'm not meaning puzzle games entirely because, I don't think either of us can remember the hardest round of Tetris or, Dr. Mario that we ever played. But for you, what was, in a sense, or in a game in general, the most infamous puzzle, dungeon, whatever you want to call it, that you've ever taken on? Like, what was a real brain teaser that just pissed you off in a game? And I don't mean pissed you off like it just made you angry, but it was worth solving.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I've got Steam opening up as I'm kind of answering this question just so I can flip through some different games. Oh, gosh, I don't know. A couple that come to mind. That game that I had mentioned, Catherine, is a game that very much pushes my own personal limits as far as puzzles go. Not because I don't think it's good, but because it gets so difficult at a point for me that I just can't. And I have most definitely gone onto YouTube and watched playthroughs just so I could figure out some of the spots. So I don't play that game on hard just because, or strive to get the gold every single time, just because it's a puzzle game that pushes me to my limits, and I'm also not particularly good at it. So I get plenty of enjoyment playing that on regular. Thinking about like sections of different games, the one that jumps out to me the most is when I played Final Fantasy X as a kid, back on the PS2. I don't exactly remember what grade I was in, but it couldn't have been much after 4th, 5th, or 6th grade. You've not played it, right, Ben?
Not yet.
Yeah, I bet you would like it. It deals with religion and such, but it has these series of dungeons, quote unquote, called the Cloisters of Trials. And it involves, solving them is easy enough. It involves, you can only hold one sphere at a time for whatever reason, and you have to move spheres around to sort of open doors, get treasure, what have you. The challenge comes with getting the destruction sphere, is what it's called, and they're in every level, and you have to get that and put it in a specific place. And as a kid, these really confused the heck out of me because, the first one or two were just basic push, pull, and then also deal with spheres, and then they add different like layers, whether it's ice or teleporting pads or what have you. I don't know, it's been quite a while since I played that game, and to be honest, I don't love those Cloisters of Trials. But as a kid, they frustrated me endlessly. I know there's stuff in Final Fantasy IX too, but or maybe 7, but I'm drawing a blank. I'm not remembering so good. It's that old age is catching up.
Dude, I mean, look, with the way the world's been lately, it's kind of hard to cling to some of those things. So I'm right there. For me, if I might share my own personal experience with a game that was a real son of a bitch.
Yeah, please do.
So again, I know that the Legend of Zelda series are strategy, and that there are puzzles within the realms of the dungeons. And so I'm going to speak to one in particular that is brutally infamous, and that would be the Water Temple in Ocarina of Time. I thought people were kidding about how difficult it was and that people just liked to hate it. Good God Almighty. I think it is only rivaled by the Water Temple in Majora's Mask, which I love. I love that as a puzzle. But truly, I know that there are a number of people who are video gamers that are probably listening to this, and if they have played the Water Temple in Ocarina of Time, they are probably breaking ceramic plates or something, because it's just one of those things where it's the subversion, right? It's like you think that you're going the right way, and then you realize that you've done something wrong, and you need to go back and do it again. And
see, but to me, that's not subversion. That's just tedium. That's my biggest problem with the Water Temple.
I can see that. And there, don't get me wrong, there is a level of tedium to it. Absolutely. But there's also moments of, wait, you mean I was supposed to do this? Which to me, it can be kind of tricky. But I guess that's where I like the one in Majora's Mask more. The Great Bay Temple. Because that one You have the switches and which one's turning on the water, which one is turning off the water, which one is controlling the direction. You memorize, you learn, like you'd mentioned earlier, and you apply the knowledge and what you've gained. Knowledge. I'm here in my garage with my Lamborghinis and my bookshelves. You gain a certain amount of knowledge from playing the game. That was for you, Ty Lopez, wherever you are. He's not listening to this. There's no way he's listening to this.
I'm thinking of one right now that I bet we've both played and gone through is, any of the early gen Pokemon games, right? Pokemon
sure.
Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold, Silver, Crystal. Specifically thinking of Victory Road and Rock Tunnel.
Oh my God, that's a bloody maze, but it is a puzzle.
It is a puzzle. You have to, for Victory Road, you need Strength, Cut, Rock Smash once you get to Gen 2 or 3, I think, and Surf to get through everything. So that presents a puzzle in and of itself as far as, how am I going to navigate that along with keeping a competitive moveset for my Pokemon.
Right.
And the classic workaround is just to have an HM slave, which I always felt weird using that term, but...
I always felt bad for them, too.
Yeah, just, the caveat with Pokemon was always, like, you catch them and you bond with them, and then your HM slave, you're just like, fuck you, break that boulder, fuck you, cut that tree down, and then I'm going to put you away and never play with you again.
Yep. And then, like, there's that one time where you're, like, in battle and you're like, oh my God, the only one left is the HM slave. Who's, like, a level 12.
Go, Bidoof, use Flash. Articuno, use Drill Peck. Yeah, and those aren't strictly puzzles, but they've got elements of it, especially, like if you're trying to be a stubborn kid and navigate Rock Tunnel without Flash, right? That becomes almost a maze of sorts. Mazes are puzzles. Yeah, so, not really a strict puzzle, but, still a maze.
I would agree. I mean, and mazes are brain teasers in their own right. So, I mean, they fall in the category, right? I mean, I don't know if I'd say sequence solving, but they involve, spatial recognition. That's puzzly.
And I think the Pokemon games, I granted I haven't played a ton of them getting into the later series. I have Shield. I can't really get into it personally, but I think the last one I played for real was X and Y. And, the Pokemon games I think they have good puzzles considering who their audience is. And I think that's what people forget sometimes when they, like, really shit on the new Pokemon games, is it's like, yeah, you're shitting on them because you're 28, right? And you were the target audience whenever Red, Blue, Gold, Silver was out.
Precisely.
So I think Pokemon's always had a pretty good balance of that. Again, I could be wrong because I haven't played a ton of them and I haven't got far enough in Shield to really discern that. But, it's always pretty, like, the ones that I always liked the most were, like, dealing with Team Rocket's tower where they had the arrows on the floor and you had to, like, shoot across the floor with those arrows. Well,
and truth be told, Rick, those puzzles that we took on, I think really, when I go back and, like, go to the Team Rocket Tower and, there's Giovanni and all that jazz, like, I think it, in a sense, was harder, which is not me saying that, like, the generation right now that isn't experiencing Pokemon, like, those who are now 8 years old and playing these games are being shortchanged or, the games are made easier for them, but, like, I don't know, it felt more difficult to me,
Yeah, just to be clear, Ben is saying that kids today are dumb.
They
don't make them like they used to, did they, Ben?
I don't know, but what's the guy got to do to get a drinker out here?
Is that Dean Martin?
Is Dino?
I went down a rabbit hole the other night. Did you watch Hey Arnold as a kid?
Oh, Dino Spumoni.
Dino Spumoni. You left my heart in pieces on the floor. Tell me why shouldn't I break something of yours? Oh my God. So crazy. I always thought his nose was a piece of salami as a kid because they just made it so, like, egregiously Italian and huge.
It's that show is incredible.
For sure. Yeah, I wanted to talk, Ben. Do you play any puzzle games that aren't video games?
Like, do I do, like, Sudoku and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely
Or like
do.
the crossword puzzle.
Absolutely, yes.
Bop It. Would you consider Bop It a puzzle game?
It's a sequence puzzle game, absolutely.
It's a sequence, yeah, I'm with you. Here's a good one. Would you consider chess, checkers, and Chinese checkers, are those puzzle or strategy games?
I would say they lean much more strongly into the strategy game category. It's sort of like sports versus games, you know what I mean?
Certainly chess for strategy, for sure.
Yes.
But I mean, there's an element of puzzles to checkers because you can only do so many things at a time.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest common threads in the middle of puzzles is solving, which one could say that that's the case with chess, or getting out of a situation, rather, I think is probably the biggest thread in a puzzle. So I think checkers definitely gets closer to puzzle than chess. I think that's fair. And I could be wrong.
I've always been a big Minesweeper fan. Really like Minesweeper. There's something comforting about the fact that there's one mechanic and it never changes, and you just have to sort of deduce and reason. That's so comforting to me.
My favorite is when there's 2 blocks left, and you're sitting there and you're looking at both of them, and you're like, son of a bitch.
And all of the clues around it do not clarify.
Yep.
Like, okay, so there's one bomb. Oh, and it could be on either of these. Okay, I guess I'm just guessing. Oh, and there goes the last 25 minutes of my life.
It's never 50-50. It's more like 1 in 10. You know what I mean? Doubt is a real doubt's a real wanker in the brain, you know?
Yeah. I went through a period too where I played a ton of Sudoku.
I love Sudoku.
And I think what makes those games fun and good puzzles is the fact that it's a simple mechanic, right? Like Sudoku, it's literally just, can you count from 1 to 9 in a sequence? That's all it is. But yet the twist makes it so interesting and intriguing, and it keeps you coming back for more. I think that way, and Snake is the same way, right? Snake becomes a sort of puzzle game where the goal that you've got one goal, and they just ramp up the complexity a little bit each time, every time you eat a piece. Yeah, so maybe I am a bigger fan of puzzles than I previously thought I was.
But I'm not surprised to hear that you're more of a puzzle fan than you thought. That just makes sense to me. You know what I mean? You're somebody who likes to use analytical thinking skills, and not just in the realms of video games, but in the worlds of tech, in the world of music. You look at things and you solve, and you see that there are better ways to do things. I think it comes with the territory of the way your noggin works there, pal.
Yeah, I think we could both say that, honestly, because, think about teaching, too. What is teaching? You're listening to a student play, and you have an ideal in your brain, what you want them to sound like, and they don't sound like that. So we reverse engineer the problem. Oh, the problem was you're phrasing everything too vertically and not horizontally. Or, in cases that aren't the organ or piano, oh, you're just not in tune on this. Okay, so we reverse engineer it and figure out, how do we get you in tune? Or how do we get you to play horizontally rather than vertically? So that's why, like, when I think about things like coding, for example, I know a lot of musicians who either do sort of like dual careers as coders or have left music to go to coding. It makes all the sense in the world to me, because it's the same sort of thought process, right? It's this linear problem solving, reverse engineering type of thinking that's, for many of us, it's very comforting. And yeah, I think I'm the same way. What games were we just talking? It doesn't really apply to Snake, does it? But Sudoku certainly has that sort of element. Crossword puzzles sort of has that sort of element.
Oh yeah, and even as I'm staring at this page right here, it says puzzle video games, and it says subgenres, logical, and then underneath of that, physics games and coding. Like, I don't know, we look for patterns as people who create music, and I think that's why we appreciate patterns that we see in games. And like, if we're, not to kind of nerd out here for a second, but whenever we like look at music theory, whenever we break down a piece of music and we start to look for recycled themes and inversions, and, it gets really satisfying to find different ways to use it. Like, I'm trying to think of a game. Like there are tools like the hook shot, for example, Legend of Zelda. It's used a lot in dungeons, but like, surprise, if there's a giant wooden box on the ground, you can pull yourself up to it and you go, oh, wait a second. I can use this for these things. And I think we get a similar satisfaction when studying a piece of music and seeing a leitmotif and other sorts of things.
Yeah, and I've always loved music theory, don't get me wrong, but it's another reason that I also really always have loved jazz theory, right? Like as far as saxophone goes, like I can get by with jazz, but I've never been like a jazz person, although I am trying to get back into that now that, music has taken a different turn. But, it's very much like a puzzle. You've got a G7 chord. You've got your notes G, B, D, F natural. What can I play? Well, you could play C major, or you could play G mixolydian. You could play, I'm blanking on the names. You could raise that fourth, still have all the same notes. You could raise the fourth, flat the two. Suddenly you've got a different flavor. You could play some diminished scales. You could even go into pentatonics that are like one or two notes above or below, and it gets kind of interesting too. So it becomes this whole kind of, puzzle sequence that you sort of work it out in terms of like, what can I use here? What can I use there? And it's it's the same tools as, quote unquote, normal music theory. Common practice tonality music theory, I would be the appropriate way to say that. But it's using them a little differently too. And then once you get into some more advanced theory, like, Charles Ives is just always on my brain. So that's who I usually go to. Or Webern or
Schenkerian
Scriabin. Schenker is a good one. Not to get too off topic, but did you ever vibe with Schenker? I always thought Schenker was kind of bullshit.
I think it's, and forgive me to those who are listening that have given me books on Schenker. Yeah, you're looking at the micro and the macro, and it's like, can't we just like look? I have eyes, I have ears, I can do this. I don't need to dissect like a blood cell. You know what I mean?
I think there's something to be said for micro versus macro, because, if you've got the chord progression 1 4 1 5 1, that's all one. That's all it is. It's not a it's all one. But, boiling down, Schenker, his whole thing was every piece can be boiled down to tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic. I think that's that reminds me of somebody that like is smart and is deliberately trying to be clever to trick other people and gets like a, well, actually kind of thing going on. You know what I mean?
Composer intent doesn't matter.
Nope.
Sorry, it does. No, this is exactly what I'm saying though. Like modes in music, right? Those are their own rules. And I mean, I said about Amnesia, it's a game that is enhanced by its limits. That's kind of the beauty of good puzzle building in games and in good composition, is like, how is this used? Like, oh, we've mixed up the meter now. We've gone from 4/4 to 3/4. Why the heck are we singing Deck the Halls in 7/8? I don't know, but we can, and that makes it all the more exciting. Now let's see, where do we take time? Where do we add time? It's just, and I think that's what we like about games too, Rick. I think it's in the same exact, same vein, really.
And while we're on the topic of, video games going to non-video games, sort of bridging the gap between the two to go full circle, Legos, right? Surely you were a Lego fan.
I did some Legos. I didn't have many Legos, but I did enjoy the Legos I did have.
I didn't have many either, and it's because they're so damn expensive.
They're too expensive. They're too expensive for what they are.
Even as an adult with like real adult money.
Right.
Like I can buy some dumb ass shit with my real adult money if I wanted to. Yeah. Even when I go to, I almost said Toys R Us and I had a moment. Rest in peace. Even when I go to the store and I see like a really magnificent Lego set, like even something as basic as a skyscraper, or, the one that I always wanted, the Millennium Falcon.
Oh, yeah.
They're so expensive, and it's like, I can afford it, but I can't justify this,
Right.
Like, I want it, but I'm not going to pay $200+
to stare,
which would be a steal for the Millennium Falcon as far as I'm aware, but,
No, and that's just it. Like, They're puzzles in their own right. They're like puzzles that you create, and that's very fun and very good. Kind of like whenever you get like a 3D puzzle of like the Eiffel Tower or Big Ben or something like that. Like those are puzzles and those are cool, but comes a point where you look at it and go, did I just create something to collect dust? And I think 70% of the time people do.
And I wonder too if that's not part of the reason why Minecraft had such a boom and why it continues to be so incredibly successful to this day.
I think the nail on the head was just hit by you. I did not mean to sound like Yoda there with my arrangement of words. But no, I mean, Rick, there are people who've made working cell phones out of Minecraft. Like, where's the ceiling? Oh, sorry, it doesn't exist. Like, endless things you can create and endless things you can do, and people are still learning things you can make and do.
And I think the appeal there is, it's what if a puzzle without any constraints? Or what if a puzzle without any railroad tracks? Just here's your mechanics, go for it.
Mm-hmm. And that's the brilliance of the game, is that the core mechanics are, at the end of everything, destroy a block, put a block down. Love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, I love it more in theory than I actually love it, because I get super analysis paralysis whenever I do those games. So I generally don't play. I haven't played Minecraft since high school. But as a concept and in theory, I think it's one of the coolest things around. That's why, like, when they announced Steve for Smash, I was like, yeah, of course they did. Minecraft is like the biggest game ever.
And by an indie company, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, completely so.
Come on, you know what I mean? Like, that's wild. And if I can be honest with you, Rick, that game has helped me to overcome my paralysis analysis, because I go, okay, well, what happens if I just try this? It feels like a free space, a free sandbox.
Yeah, you take everything one block at a time, and before you know it, you've built an entire village.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You ever play Number Munchers in elementary school?
That just unlocked a memory that I didn't know that I had.
Technically speaking, that was a puzzle game that we all played.
Or what about the Secret Island of Dr. Quandary?
I never played that one.
Oh, they had weird sprites that always creeped me out as a kid.
Nice. How about Putt Putt Travels Through Time? No, it's not a puzzle game.
Hey, don't reveal our January lineup, Ben.
Oh, sorry. So we're going to cover Putt Putt Travels Through Time. It's going to be a 15-minute episode, and we're just going to listen to Dean Martin and never. Sorry. Yeah. Don't ask us to do Putt Putt Travels Through Time, please.
Well, do you have anything else in terms of, I know this is a bit of a shorter episode, and I don't want to cap it prematurely, but it does feel like the cadence of the conversation is winding down to that of an ending. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we do wrap this up?
In terms of puzzles and games, not necessarily. I it's such a broad topic, Rick, that we could sit here for 6 hours. But in the future, we could have other conversations about what makes this a successful puzzle game. What about games that are pure strategy? What about games that are literally there's, little to no puzzle solving? Or what if, is Grand Theft Auto a puzzle game? I don't know.
Well, how about this? Let's end with just a simple this or that. Would you rather play a straight up puzzle game, so Tetris, keep talking and nobody explodes, or would you rather play a game that has puzzles in it, such as The Legend of Zelda?
I would always rather play a game that has puzzles in it, but I do love puzzle games. How about you?
I think I'm with you, but if I have the itch to play like a puzzle, something like Legend of Zelda or Catherine is not gonna scratch it. I'll need like a puzzle game, like a straight up crunchy puzzle game,
something to reach your hands into and just break up and put together.
Yeah, really manhandle the Tetris blocks.
Yeah, kind of pulverize the meat.
Really grip those L blocks with both hands.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I appreciate that this or that. It's like any game, you know what I mean? Like if somebody said, would you rather play a racing game or a platformer? It depends on the mood I'm in. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I know what you mean.
But no, I think you and I are in a similar category with how we feel about RPGs, and you particularly JRPGs. We like games that have story and substance, but also have a few little brain ticklers in there. It gets the brain all tickly.
Yep, if there's one thing that Ben and I like after a long, hard day, it's a good tickle of the brain. Please keep that silence in there, Ben.
I was hoping that you would just, you know what? I will keep the silence. We'll leave the tickle of the brain in there. It's really tempting, though, to just leave it as a good tickle. Yeah,
If you'd like to get a hold of us and give us a tickle, where could they find us, Ben?
Well, for a tickle, the corner of 44th and Shady. I'm kidding. No, if you want to find us, you could find us on our Instagram. It's at Pixel Project Radio Podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. That's our Instagram. You can also send us an email at pixelprojectradio.com. No, pixelprojectradio@gmail.com. We don't have a website. We've also got a Discord server that, again, anyone is free to join. It's going to be in the episode description of every episode, and it's also in our bio on Instagram, so double the reason to go to our Instagram.
Yeah. We also have a Twitter. We don't use it very much. It's at Pixel Project Pod. Or is it Pixel Project Radio Pod?
I think so. If you search Pixel Project Radio on Twitter, we'll come up.
It should just come up, everyone.
And speaking of our Instagram, once again, the poll that was started by Ben has concluded. Our scariest games,
yeah, I know,
plural, of all time have been revealed to be PT and Silent Hill 2.
Can't believe it.
And we're going to cover both of them.
We will. In 2022, we will find respective months to play them. I was really shocked by the fact that they had both done so well. Now, next year, we're going to have to pick a solid winner. But for this year, the fact that many people were voting for them to share the title was flabbergasting. But, it's nice that people are that willing to... I mean, that was really nice to see that the community that we have is one of kindness and inclusion and not one of, to the death! You know what I mean? Not saying that that's not justified, but, come on.
And also, speaking of our Instagram, we are currently, maybe not right now, I don't think it's up right this second, but we are gathering questions for our AMA segment at the end of the year. That's something we'll be doing for our last episode in December, just as a nice casual way to round out the year. So as long as it's nothing too personal or too gross, or you're not being deliberately obstinate towards us, you can ask us whatever you want, and we'll answer it. We'll shout you out on air, unless you ask us not to. And yeah, good time will be had by all.
That's right. And tonight, Mr. Kite is topping the bill or something. What is it?
I think that's right.
I think so.
Yeah,
too.
I think that's right.
I knew you would get it. Because I still remember the fact that your family thinks that your favorite Beatle is John Lennon, even though it's actually Paul McCartney.
Did they say that?
I remember you telling me that in college. You said, yeah, I love the Beatles and my favorite is Paul McCartney, but for some reason my family thinks that it's John Lennon, so they get me John Lennon stuff.
I don't dislike John Lennon. I think there's been a real outcry against him on TikTok because he wrote a song with Yoko once called "Woman is the N-word of the world."
He did.
TikTok said, well, he used the N-word, so horrible person. And it comes up on my FYP all the time. All that to say, I respect John Lennon, not because he used the word, the no-no word, but because he was a great artist that just happened to do a lot of shitty things. Probably could say the same about all of the Beatles, to be honest.
Say a lot about a lot of people in humanity, which is not a justification for it, but for goodness sakes, I mean, you point one finger, three are pointing back, everybody, so be careful.
Oh man, we can't draw out another hour on this topic. not on the puzzle episode. Not on the puzzle episode.
Not on the bloody puzzle episode.
It's too sacred.
It's time for Dean.
All right, I think that about wraps it up.
We are Pixel Project Radio, and we give thanks for you, our listener, and we'll look forward to talking to you again real soon.